He inspired us last year at this summit, and because one of our industry's favorite questions is where in the world is Joe Rohde today, please welcome from Walt Disney Imagineering, Harrison Hightower, AKA Executive Designer, Vice President Creative, Joe Rohde.
Thank you, Pat. Pat was very specific about the content of my presentation, and so I am going to take orders and stick to my knitting and talk about what I was asked to talk about and attempt in some way to make that relevant and salient to the people present here. As you can see from the title, it's a long shot to make that happen, but as I say, I am going to try. So, I was getting kind of antsy. And I thought I needed to do something. And so this past fall, I put together an expedition to go to the Western Altai Mountains in Mongolia to travel and do a series of paintings to raise money for snow leopard conservation. I am a member of the Explorers Club, the actual Explorers Club, which is an actual building in New York City full of actual explorers, of whom I am probably the most podunk, weenie, least qualified, most honored to be included person, because it includes like astronauts and shit. And I'm in there because of some Animal Kingdom stuff. So highly privileged to be a member of this august society. I had decided that I wanted to go to Mongolia. And I hate going places as a passive tourist, sort of like a potato in a bucket being shown stuff. So I really wanted to do something. And I've noticed several of the speeches today, in particular, Welby Atador's speech about purpose and the underlying idea behind something very close to my heart. I wanted to go there. I wanted to do something. And I find, and you should bear in mind, I find this in my work as well, that if you add this additional alchemy of specific purpose to any mission, it drives it interestingly sideways from what you thought you were going to do. You can kind of create adventure by setting out to go sideways. So I knew I was going to go to Mongolia. I was going to go to Mongolia. I happen to be a painter anyway. I'm going to paint anyway. I didn't know that I would be doing these paintings to raise money for snow leopards, and I didn't know where that would send me. That emerged out of the occasion, and it led us on a really interesting, very interesting journey. Bob Gert had mentioned, that he's done all these amazing engineering things, and he himself does not have a degree as an engineer. Neither do I have a research degree. I have no advanced degrees. I went to work. And so the fact that I was going to do this expedition is sort of really, really stretching for a person like me. And I was last year at the Explorers Club dinner, which happens in New York City. And it really is pretty much like any other normal dinner where you have a choice of salmon or steak and you sit there and they give awards. But they're like giving awards to people that paddled around the world and climbed Mount Everest and went to the moon and stuff. It's just kind of cool. And I happen to be sitting next to the guy who's in charge of whether you can carry an official flag on your expedition. And I happened to tell him that I was going to Mongolia and he'd been to Mongolia. He said, "Oh, you should apply for a flag." And I'm like, I know that I come across as a big personality and all this stuff, but I feel like a 6-year-old at this meeting. So I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to apply for a flag and I don't deserve a flag. No, you should apply. You should apply for a flag. I'm on the committee. So I apply for this flag. And I actually got this official flag, which means my expedition becomes an official flag expedition, which is this whole burden of responsibility. On top of this whole thing, you got to file a report, and now it's like, oh my God, I have to really do something. I have to accomplish something. So that flag was from 1960. It had been on 40 expeditions. It had been to Antarctica, India. It had been on NASA expeditions. And now I'm like taking it to go paint paintings. So anyway. I set off on this expedition with this purpose to paint paintings for snow leopards. Now you may wonder, why is this an issue? Why is there an issue? Snow leopards. Snow leopards are, like many big cats, endangered. They're endangered by a combination of factors. One of them is that it's very intriguing to people in Asian countries to cut them up and make medicine and things out of their parts. Illegal in all countries, but nonetheless lucrative. And so in some cases, snow leopards are just captured, processed into medical things, and sold in a variety of countries. Another problem is, of course, that snow leopards live in places, they pretty much live in really remote areas, but where they live, there is an ancient tradition of herding animals. And the ancient tradition of herding animals, no problem at all. Guy's got like 14 goats. Over the course of the winter, he eats 6. You know, the other goats breed back again. Next year, he's got 14 goats. Each goat's worth $15. Snow leopard comes and kills a couple goats, you're out $30. And you got to eat dried goat for 4 weeks. Well, that's all gone now because Mongolia is no longer, subsidized by the Soviet regime that once ruled it. It is now a free market capitalist nation. So these guys want to make money with their goats. So they don't have 14 goats. They have like 250 or 400 or 700 cashmere wool goats. And each of those goats are worth $2,000. So when a snow leopard eats one of those goats, this guy's really pissed off. And it is a small world, so he does have a calculator, and it doesn't take him long to figure out, oh my God, look at the profit loss statement on this. I've got to go do something. On top of which, the 200 goats take up way more space than 16 goats, so they're eating all the territory, all the land, and all the ibex, and all the argali, and all the elk and deer, and everything else that snow leopard would be eating. They're all gone, because those goats, they're like a nuclear bomb. So they go through and they just eat everything, and there's nothing left to eat but goats. So the snow leopard comes down for dinner, eats the goat. The herder goes to his calculator, ping, 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 ping. Well, ours goes $4,000. I'm going to go get the snow leopard, which in fact he really doesn't even want to kill. They love snow leopards, but he's got the profit and loss statement. So there's this problem. Interesting problem that comes from that same global world that we all enjoy now, that we're all working in, that we all share. So we want to go do this, and I wanted to do something. This is an interesting point. I think a lot of us are stunned into passivity by the largeness of the problems in front of us, by the, the whole world's going to hell, and climate change, and all the animals are going extinct, and everybody hates each other, and they're shooting each other, and kids are starving, and can't do anything about any of this stuff. This is pretty much an illusion. It's just like a physics lesson. Any action at all, any momentum at all, any motion you take at all is a quantum leap from nothing. It's like there's a world of doing nothing, and then there's another whole world of doing anything, and anything includes the most famous people in the world doing all that famous stuff like Jane Goodall, and you, if you do anything. And if you don't do anything, you just become a passive conduit for other people's decisions, which strikes me as servile, and so I don't like it. So I thought, look, what? It's going to be a few $1,000s for snow leopard conservation, which is not much, just better than nothing. So I set forth to do this. Now, to do this, you have to travel with camels, because obviously anywhere where there's roads, there's no snow leopards, and there's just nothing. So we went there. We traveled by camel. It's a trackless ride system. It allows you to travel wherever you want to go. It's guest controllable. You can direct the camels to travel any direction you want. And it's sustainable because it runs off local fuels. And in fact produces fuel that can be used for heating and cooking as well. So it's a really remarkable way to travel. It's very sustainable, and it actually gets you just pretty much anywhere you want to go. And in fact can carry exactly as much supplies as a giant SUV, which I was shocked to see. We pulled up, as you'll see later, in 2 big old Toyota Land Cruisers, which were piled roof high with stuff and stuffed like Christmas geese. We unloaded those things and we put them on 2 camels. And camels, I don't know how familiar you are with camels. These are Bactrian camels. Big old giant prehistoric animal loaded up with 1,000 pounds worth of stuff that makes a noise like a little kitten. They're going, meow. Man up. Anyway, So it was a kind of Voorproef. It was a baptism of fire, except with ice. And off we went into this trackless wilderness to find habitats where snow leopards lived, to paint the paintings, and then I would bring them back and sell them, first in Ulaanbaatar, which is the capital of Mongolia, and then here in the United States. Of course, there is kind of hospitality tradition and accommodations. We both stayed in local yurts, and we had our own little tents, which we packed along with us, which were cold. In the interest of full disclosure, I did spend several days at the end of the trip at this wonderful place, Three Camels Lodge, just about the only themed resort in Mongolia. Remember, there's that long kind of Soviet tradition of, concrete and all of that. They're just pulling out of that. It's just like, pull out, Luke. So they're just getting to the place of thinking that maybe, their own culture and their own cultural heritage and the way that things had been done is a thing of value. And people who come to Mongolia might want to stay in a place that seemed Mongolian. That's all just dawning upon the system. And in the future, we may see more from this. I like to make things with my hands. I made my brushes from local material. I'm the Garner Holt of paintbrushes. I got yak hair and goat hair and eagle feathers and owl feathers and sheep wool. And I'd make all these brushes because, to be honest, I figured I'm trying to do the biggest of these paintings were big. I mean, you can see that's a good-sized painting. That painting's like 4 by 5. I had a day to do a painting. There's only a certain style of painting that you can execute in a day that's going to look good. And it's not a very prissy, fussy, little tiny brushy kind of painting. That's not going to fly. So I was trying to create a relationship. And this, again, is something that I think we should consider in the jobs we do. We have means, we have ends. And there is a relationship between the tools you use and the process you use and the style that you attempt to express yourself in and the limitations of budget and the limitations of time and the limitation of materials. And when you're trying to do something under high pressure, under high stress, it's smart to think about where is the magic within the limitations of these materials. So for me, this was going to end up being about speed, about savageness, about immediacy, about being in a rough place, trying to do something rough. So why not do it with brushes that aren't going to do what I want in the first place? Right? The painting is going to be about the whole struggle with the brush and with the elements, and that way it'll look like that. It'll look like the kind of painting that was done in the place where it was done under the circumstances in which it was done. This photograph was taken when a photograph could be taken, which is after it stopped snowing. But I actually did this painting right through the middle of the snow because it was just, the previous day was beautiful. And I had done this big sketch of this big sacred mountain, gorgeous looking thing like a big pyramid, and I'm like going to go paint that. And I woke up the next morning, I thought it was fog, and of course it was snow. So I said, well, I'm painting anyway, damn it. So out I went. And I painted a bunch of these different landscapes, and you can get a sense for what these paintings were like from looking at this one. We moved very slowly across the landscape. Speed is usually a deficit in this kind of situation. You move too quickly, you don't really see what you're looking at. I found it very frustrating to move in a motor vehicle through the landscape because it's a landscape of very, very subtle detail, and you wanted to look at it and pay attention to it and be in it. So we traveled very slowly as people have been traveling in this landscape for 4,000 years with our camels and our horses, and that allowed us to really pay attention to the detail around us. It's a very, very, very fine grain of detail. Blades of grass, grains of gravel, tiny little micro details. This is not an empty landscape. This is also really interesting. Sometimes simple works. Who said that? One of the guys said that. Mike Davis said that. Sometimes simple works. It's really true. The landscape is so blank and the geology of Mongolia is so stable that anything anyone has ever done is just sitting there where they did it. That grave is the grave of some big tribal chieftain from 4,000 years ago. 4,000 years ago. So 4,000 years ago, a bunch of his buddies, after he passed away, went and got a bunch of rocks no bigger than cantaloupes and laid them out in a pattern on the landscape like that, and they have sat there like that for 4,000 years. That row of stones leading to that grave, like 2,000 years old. Those two stones standing next to each other like 1,000 years old, standing where they have placed for 1,000 years. And what's interesting is the focal power that these very small objects have over vast areas, the change in meaning of the space that is able to be conveyed by this tiny modification, because it is such a public and visible modification, completely redefines the space. You find yourself, and this I think is really remarkable, these guys died thousands of years ago. Who their names are, who they were, what they did, we don't know. But we still are thinking about them because of these marks on the landscape that are so simple, but so clear and so abstract. It's very interesting. This is a region of extraordinary hospitality, because otherwise everybody would be dead. So you literally have the right in Mongolia to walk into someone's home, which is a yurt, walk in and sit down in the first quarter of the yurt. We did it. We were traveling over a high pass. It became rapidly very cold, which is remarkable because it was always cold. So now it was really cold. Camels are rebelling, horses are rebelling. You know, one of the horses runs away, the camels all get down on the ground and make their sound. And we're like, well, we're not going to get where we're going. We're not going to get to the place where we're trying to get today. So we have to get somewhere because it's really cold, like cold. And I know some of you are from cold countries and you're thinking, you're just a wimp. I'm talking, it was really, really cold, like eyelash frozen cold. And our Mongolian guy is like, it is cold. We must find shelter. We will go there. And he points down the side of the mountain at what look like 3 little Tic Tacs on the ground, which are yurts. And we ride down to this yurt, and of course the yurt we ride into is that one I showed you that looked like Yurt from the Dawn of Time, fabulous yurt. And he just opens the door, and we walk into the yurt, and we sit down in this yurt, and the woman who's working in the yurt, she's working on a hand crank Singer sewing machine, kind of looks up like, who has walked into my yurt? Oh, 2 white guys, one with a movie camera, one with giant earrings, and a giant Mongolian guy. Okay, here's tea, some biscuits, some cheese, I'm busy, you guys knock yourself out. So we're in this yurt, and then later the patriarch, Saleem Khan, these are all Kazakhs, by the way, it's a Muslim area, ancient version of Islam, Kazakhs. Saleem Khan comes, you know, giant 75-year-old Kazakh guy is like, it is too cold. You cannot travel. You must not travel. You will not travel. You will stay. My daughter-in-law will give you her yurt. She doesn't know this, right? Next thing we know, we're set up in the daughter-in-law's yurt as a studio, as a safe room, and I used this as a painting studio for a couple days, and I set to work on the painting I thought I was going to do days earlier, which was this big painting of this mountain that I did from these sketches. And it's very interesting because, and I'll talk about this just a bit more, there's a whole collaborative atmosphere that arises because the work is very public. I mean, you're making something, right? And everybody wants to be involved in this, so Saleem Khan is like, my yurt shall be your studio. You know, what can I bring you? Now we will feast, I will bring food. And we do the paintings. The paintings don't dry. Always be prepared for failure. What's your plan for failure? So when the paintings did not dry, we would drape them like camel blankets over the camels and clip them off with bulldog clips, and then we would travel for that day with the paintings draped over the camels in the wind and the sun, which damn well would make them dry. So by the next day, we could roll them up. Now, this was all about snow leopards. You're never going to see a snow leopard. I saw a snow leopard once in Nepal. It disappeared right in front of my eyes like Predator. I mean, it was like right there and gone. So these snow leopards are watching us the whole time, we know, because we find fresh tracks. So we're hiking along and we see snow leopard tracks, and the snow leopard is the only large, big cat that has never been known to attack a human. And so, of course, the moment we see these tracks, we're like, we are following these tracks. So off the horses, and we start following these tracks up into the snow leopard dens and their perches, and thinking, what's the worst that could happen, you know? Unless they're wrong, you know, you do stop to think, I guess if you did get eaten by a snow leopard in a landscape like this, you couldn't tell somebody, but, you know. So anyway, so I sat in this spot where this snow leopard sat, and this gives you a sense of the kind of painting that was achievable with these scrappy brushes. I sat in the spot where this snow leopard had sat and looked out across this view. It's very clear, very military kind of like, I sit here, I can see that whole valley, I can see that whole valley, I can see that whole valley from this spot. It's a very obvious place where they sit. And I did the master sketch for this, and then we rode down the hill. It sounds easier than it was. We lost our camels and almost died. But we rode down the hill, and I completed the sketch in camp. So now this is I'm going to get back to this point of painting public work, working together. These are cultures of labor. These are cultures where people work. Painting is a very public thing. The art with your hands is a very public act. So I've done this before in the Himalayas and other places. You start to draw, you start to paint, you bring out a bunch of tools, you set up a work spot, you bring out working materials, and you go to work. And everyone looks, and these are all farmers and blacksmiths and herdsmen and saddlers, and they're looking at this guy, and this guy's working. This is work. He's working. He has some kind of skill. He's doing a job. It's taking time. It takes some kind of talent. It must have a purpose. And I'm standing here with my hands in my pocket. I got to help. That's what we do here. In these cultures, work means work together. Nobody works alone. Everybody works together. So within a day, you have this giant crew. So everybody is going to be helping you. So I end up with fantastically more production capability than I thought I would have had, because I don't have to stretch my canvas, because these guys are going to stretch the canvas, right? They're going to set up the easels. They're going to get the stuff. They're going to lay up the paints. They're like going to do it, because this is work. We got to do this work. So what's interesting, and I think it relates to a lot of the conversations today, is this notion of community. When you work together, it changes the work you thought you were going to do. If I was in isolation, if I was here, if I was alone and I was painting just the paintings I thought I was going to paint, that's different paintings from the paintings that we're all going to paint together, because we're all working on this together. And so there's a very curious community of work that comes out of this. It reminded me of the Polynesian Cultural Center presentation. You know, the fact that you don't quite know what you're going to do. You just know you're going to work together. And I didn't know I was going to be working with all these people, but I sure as hell was. And so we're going to do something together. So Bob Gert would be proud, you know, completely portable living system, disassembles, goes onto our transport, breaks down into tiny components, goes up in 45 minutes, and so warm, you got to be in a t-shirt when you're inside. They'd put up our yurt every day. You know, it's not time travel. These people don't live in the past. They have cell phones. At one point, I'm sitting in this yurt with these guys, and my proud Mongolian guide is like, Joe Rohde, he is working with James Cameron, he's working on Avatar, and everyone, these are like nomads in a yurt, like, oh yeah, Avatar, good movie. Really interesting. But there is a dynamic, an interesting dynamic, and it reminded me of the Belfast presentation, the Titanic Belfast presentation, where when you bring creativity to a place, people are made more aware of their own capability, more aware of the own possibilities of the place where they live. They don't see, the world's too close to them. They don't see it. They don't see the beauty of where they live. They don't see the uniqueness of where they live until you start looking at it, until you frame it, until you call attention to it. And so there's another whole dynamic here of the group becoming more aware of themselves and more aware of where they live. And this whole creation of this yurt gallery, this had nothing to do with me. They just decided, we're going to make a yurt gallery. We're going to take all the paintings, we're going to put them on the outside of the yurt, we're going to put them on the inside of the yurt, we're going to go right off and call all the nomads, we're all going to come to this yurt gallery because we've all been working on these paintings, right? And now we're going to put them all out for everyone to see, and really just this really interesting dynamic. And it's a dynamic that I think we who work in the creative realm bring to a relationship. It's a different dynamic from working together on a dam, or working together on a new corral for livestock. It has something to do with matters and ideas that people hold very important, and they're very socially engaged. And you have to be prepared for that social engagement to take you wherever it might take you. And in this case, it basically hijacked the trip. I'm pushing buttons. See, I pushed too many. So we're riding along on our camels and horses, right? And we have this place we think we're going up in this valley. And we just stop in this place. We just stop. And I don't know. I don't speak a lot of Mongolian, like 2 words, and I don't speak any Kazakh. And they're like, okay, we're stopping. Why are we stopping? You must paint this tree. Oh. Okay, why am I? Well, this is a sacred tree, the sacred female shaman's tree in the sacred grove of female shaman trees. And this tree was protected by the grandmother of Gantuya here, who is the chief lady who clearly kicks butt and is in charge of everyone, right? And her grandmother protected this tree from the Soviets, and they would have cut it down, and she saved it, and it is a very special tree, and you must paint it. Well, I'm going to do that. So this is not at all what we were going to do. This had nothing to do with where we thought we were going, what we thought we were going to do, completely from sideways. But, so I go over to this grove with all the trees are very strange, and they all have these big, very feminine kind of apertures in them, and they're all twisty and ancient, and there's all these eagle feathers lying around on the ground. And I think, oh, well, I'm going to make a brush out of one of these eagle feathers. So take one of the eagle feathers, because there's eagle nests up in the trees. So I take one of these eagle feathers, and I'm making my brush. And this ends up being like magic, really, truly, like a magic story, like the best brush I have ever painted lines with. It was fabulous, like it wanted to paint. So I did all the line work, all the lay-in for this thing with this beautiful, beautiful brush, completed the painting. This painting never left Mongolia. It was bought in Mongolia, it hung in Mongolia, it'll stay in Mongolia forever. But you can see these scarves that they hang from the branch, and this little altar that's kind of set up in the foreground. This is like all real stuff. I'm there painting, and they bring all these offerings of milk and tea and meat to the little altar, and they circumambulate the altar and chant and do all this stuff in this grove. And it's very restful, sit and paint what the nomads told me to paint. And, all of this was a journey we were making across this landscape to get to a World Wildlife Fund funded snow leopard research camp, which was our ultimate destination. It went from a landscape that sort of would remind you of Montana to a landscape that would remind you of all the land between here and Las Vegas, like really rough, deserty, raw landscape. Increasingly, it's not really dangerous. It all sounds so sexy and dramatic. It's just like places on a trail where for the next 20 feet you have to be very, very careful, right? You're on a horse. They always tell you, oh, the sure-footed horses. There's all like horse skeletons and shit down there. And my first horse was great. My first horse, it was like riding a Segway. I swear to God, I could rid this horse into this room and in between these tables back and forth and out. It was fantastic. My second horse was terrified of heights. If you've ever been on, I don't know how many of you have ever ridden a horse, but they don't tend to walk like this. That's not what they do. And it's not good for them because the trail's over here. So my horse was just terrified. Which is just a bad thing to be on when you're way up high. And, it's not like it's a cliff. It's like a gravelly slope that leads to a cliff. So, in your head, you're thinking, if the horse goes down, I'm jumping off this way and spreading myself out flat like a spider face down in the gravel, hoping that I'll stop sliding before I get to the cliff. That's my plan, right? So it's that kind of stuff, which is actually, it goes by very quickly. It's no different than driving on the freeway. You know, you're driving along on the freeway, and all of a sudden the truck does this, and the car does that, and it zip, 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 and it's gone. And it's gone. It's just like that. That's as bad as it gets. The rest of it is just, you know, eating the same food day after day, and pooping in a hole and sleeping on the ground. You can do that forever. So we get to the camp. This is the summit, our journey, where these snow leopard researchers are tracking snow leopards with collars on, and we're going to stay in their camp, and we're going to follow these snow leopards through the mountains and talk about science and conservation. And there's one of the scientists who's there with us, and we are in conversation with him, and it becomes clear in short order. I ask him, it's like, what is the best hope snow leopards have? What is the strongest factor ensuring their survival? And this guy says, traditional oral stories, legend, oral traditions is the #1 factor protecting snow leopards in Mongolia today. And I thought that was very, very interesting, that in the face of all the science and all the data, and by the way, I don't think we are all very much different than this. There's mountains of data. We all know all the arguments. We all know about climate change. We know about carbon. We know about endangered species. We know about water conservation. We all know the data. The nomads all know the data. Everybody knows the data. They're just not rational creatures. We are not rational creatures. We're not creatures of data. We're creatures of poetry and of metaphor and of symbols and of emotion. And so the most effective thing stopping these Mongolian herdsmen from killing snow leopards is the same legends and stories that were told by the people that raised up those stone monuments 4,000 years ago. And we are the masters of those stories. We live in a world of mystery. We live in a world of mythology. And the scientists have kind of done their work. They did the work. The work's done. We know the elephants are in trouble. We know we got to stop pumping carbon into the atmosphere. We know this stuff. It's just that the only people talking about it right now are really ill-equipped to convince the broad public of anything, because they're all like scientists, and they're like really into they're just not, they're not artists and poets and storytellers and creators. I think this sense of purpose begins to infuse all of our work. Our leisure, this is leisure for me, the work that we do every day, the sense of urgency, the sense of purpose, the sense that we should be talking about something is not going to go away. It's going to get more. It's going to get more, because the world situation is going to get more, and people are going to expect more of us. And I think they're going to want us to tell stories that have meaning. They're going to want us to tell stories that help them change their minds, because the data won't help them change their minds. It doesn't, it hasn't. If it had, it would. It would. I mean, tigers aren't less endangered today than they were 40 years ago. There's less of them today. So clearly, the news isn't changing people. But I think the poetry can. I think the stories can. I think the symbols can. I think people like us can. And I think that is kind of the job in front of us, to be another kind of voice. Not a voice, not just repeating what the scientists say, but using our own voices. Voices that are creative, voices that are artistic, voices that are poetic, voices that speak straight to the real human creature, which is not a rational creature, and try to do something with what it is we do, because we are no different than the snow leopard. We are as endangered as the snow leopard. The story of the snow leopard and its fate is ours. So the story that we're telling is a story we're going to tell about ourselves. It is the story. Us in the world. And what did somebody say? Oh, it was so cool. What we know, it's not what we know, it's what we do with what we know. You said that. Yes, that's what it is. It's not what we know, it's what we do with what we know. So I just think, as I said, the difference between 0 and anything, that's the difference. That's the difference. Everything else is gravy. So think about it. When a job comes up, when leisure presents itself, when your time and your skill and your talent present themselves to you as something to do, just think about a purpose. And you don't have to use mine. This is just me. I just wanted to go to Mongolia. Next time I might want to go to Madagascar. I don't know. But I think there is something to this. And I think that if there is going to be great change, if there is going to be great impact, it'll come from people like us. It'll come from storytellers, because clearly, if the scientists are coming all the way around to that conclusion, then that's where we sit. And that's kind of what I have to say to you. I conclude with that and wish you all a lovely evening.
So much, Joe. Woo! Thank you, sir. Wow. Everybody on your feet. Joe Rohde. We couldn't ask for a better summary of the entire day. Wow, Joe, you do not disappoint. Thank you.